Sylvester Stallone thought he was just showing up for an interview. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez thought she was walking into an easy win. But what happened live on CNN left the host stunned, the internet divided, and veterans across America finally got the moment they'd been waiting for. She came prepared to expose hypocrisy, but minutes later, it was her own record under fire. What started as a clash of ego turned into a national reckoning. Stick around because what Stallone said next changed everything. Let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss this moments. They thought it would be a soft segment. CNN's primetime show American Dialogue had lined up an unusual pairing. A Hollywood legend and a progressive congresswoman, hoping for a few headline-worthy sound bites and maybe a little friction. But what they got was an explosion. The network's host, a seasoned moderator known for steering fiery conversations with a calm hand, opened the segment with a smile. The camera panned between Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Sylvester Stallone. One represented political fire, the other cinematic grit. The stage was set, but behind the curtain, something was already simmering. AOC had come in prepared, not just with policy talking points, but with a message and a mission. Stallone had recently made comments in support of veteran healthcare reform, calling out the political red tape that often stood between soldiers and the care they needed. The quote had gone viral. He didn't name names, but to AOC, it felt like a veiled swipe. She wasn't about to let it slide. Stallone, dressed in a simple dark suit, seemed relaxed, calm, even amused by the pairing. He greeted the host with a handshake and offered a polite nod to AOC, but she didn't return the smile. "I'm not here to make friends," she later told her team. "I'm here to call out hypocrisy." As the cameras rolled and pleasantries were exchanged, the host posed a question about Stallone's recent comments. The actor spoke with conviction, but with restraint. He talked about meeting veterans, about hearing stories that stuck with him, about how some of them felt abandoned, not by war, but by bureaucracy. It was when he said the word abandoned that AOC leaned in. "Mr. Stallone," she began, her voice sharp but composed, "you've made millions from movies that glorify war, films where you play soldiers, heroes, warriors, but you've never served. So, I have to ask, what gives you the moral authority to speak on behalf of veterans?" The question sucked the air out of the room. The host shifted in his seat. Stallone didn't blink. The audience watching live leaned closer to their screens. AOC had just thrown the first punch, and in doing so, she made a critical assumption that Stallone would be caught off guard, that he would flinch, that his tough guy image would crumble under real-world scrutiny. But what happened next caught everyone off guard. And by the time the night was over, it wasn't Stallone who had explaining to do. It was AOC, but to understand how this on-air ambush backfired so spectacularly, you have to hear what Stallone said next, and that's exactly where we're going. There was a beat of silence, not the awkward kind that screams discomfort, but the loaded kind, the kind that precedes something deliberate, something measured. Stallone didn't rush, he just looked at her, not with anger, not even with irritation, more like someone looking past the question to the reason it was asked. Then he spoke. "I never claimed to speak for all veterans," he said, voice low, steady, "but I've listened to them for years." AOC didn't move, but her brows tightened slightly. Stallone continued, "When I was filming First Blood, I spent time with vets who couldn't sleep through the night without reliving what they saw. Some were homeless, some were hooked on pills. All of them had one thing in common: they felt invisible." His voice wasn't theatrical. It wasn't trying to land a punchline. It was just honest. "I've been to VA hospitals. Not for publicity, not with cameras, just to sit, listen, shake hands. One guy, Marine, Gulf War, he told me, Rocky got me through nights my own country couldn't. That stuck with me." The host shifted, sensing something real happening. "I didn't serve," Stallone admitted. "And I won't pretend that makes me some kind of expert, but I can tell you what these men and women want. They want less talk, more action. They want a system that works. They don't care if it comes from a Democrat, a Republican, or a guy who made boxing movies in the 80s. They just want help." He turned slightly toward AOC, not confrontational, but direct. "I know you fight for your beliefs. I respect that. But this isn't about political identity. It's about broken bones and broken promises. AOC sat back, lips tight. She hadn't expected this tone. She'd come for a debate. What she got was a reminder that the issue at hand wasn't Stallone. It was veterans. Still, she didn't back down. She responded with statistics, reports of underfunding, delays in claims processing, suicide rates among former service members. She pointed out that systemic change required legislation, not sound bites. And she accused Stallone of simplifying a complex issue for applause. But the mood had shifted because while AOC was technically right, something about Stallone's stories resonated. Viewers could feel it. It wasn't about who had the better facts. It was about who felt closer to the truth. And in that moment, the audience on set and at home leaned toward the man who had nothing to prove but something to say. The host glanced at the teleprompter, then back at the guests. He knew they were veering off script, and that's when he asked the question that would push this exchange to the edge. "Congresswoman," he said carefully, "have the veterans in your district felt heard?" AOC blinked, and for the first time that night, she hesitated. AOC took a breath, then another. She looked directly at the host, then at Stallone. "They've been heard," she said finally. "My team and I have worked hard to respond to every veteran case that crosses our desk." It was a decent answer, safe, polished, the kind that plays well on air. But Stallone didn't react. He just listened, eyes steady, like a man waiting for truth to outweigh the script. The host leaned forward. "Do you have specific examples from the past year? Cases that were resolved or ones you're still working on?" AOC faltered just slightly. "The kind of hesitation a trained eye could spot. The kind of hesitation that told viewers watching at home, something's off." "Well," she began, "there was a case involving a Vietnam veteran who hadn't received his benefits in over a decade. We escalated it with the VA, and the process is ongoing." Ongoing. The host asked gently but firmly, "How long ago was that?" AOC hesitated again. 8 months. This time Stallone did react, but not with judgment. Just a long, slow blink, and that said more than words. "I'm not saying we're perfect," AOC added quickly. "The system is slow, but we're fighting." Stallone finally leaned in. 8 months, Congresswoman, he said quietly. "That's a long time when you're hurting. A long time when you've already waited 10 years. The studio felt colder. Suddenly, a tension hung in the air, not from anger, but realization. AOC wasn't wrong. The system was a mess. But that wasn't the issue anymore. The issue was urgency. The issue was impact. And this wasn't about a talking point. It was about a man, an old one, most likely, still waiting. The host shifted the discussion. But the mood had already turned. Viewers weren't asking whether AOC cared. They were wondering if caring was enough, if good intentions could ever match what was required in the moment. Stallone said nothing more for a while. He let the silence speak for him. It didn't need emphasis. His point had landed. The host asked a final question to close the segment. "What do you both believe is the single biggest change needed right now for veterans?" AOC answered first. "Streamlined processing, less paperwork, more staff in the VA. We need to modernize." Stallone followed. "We need to show up not just with laws, with presence. Sit with them, ask what they need, then do it quietly if necessary." The segment ended. The screen faded to commercial, but the clip, it didn't fade. It spread within an hour. It was trending. Stallone's quiet answers, AOC's slip, the tension, the moment to pause, all of it. And soon, veterans across the country began weighing in. Not just with opinions, with stories. By morning, the internet had chosen its battlefield. Clips from the interview flooded every platform. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube Shorts. Headlines ran variations of the same theme. Stallone shuts down AOC. Hollywood versus Washington. Veterans speak out. But beyond the noise, something real was happening. Veterans were talking. A Marine from Arizona posted a simple message. "I don't care if Stallone never served. He sat next to me in the VA waiting room and listened. That's more than my congressman's done." A retired Army nurse shared, "She's right about the system, but he's right about the silence. We want presence, not platitudes." One video stood out. A young vet in a wheelchair, TikTok open, face raw with emotion. "You know what it felt like?" he said into the camera. "It felt like, for once, someone on that stage was talking with us, not about us." That video got to million views in under 10 hours. News outlets scrambled to cover the fallout. Commentators lined up to defend AOC or praise Stallone, but neither of them was making statements. Stallone had returned to Los Angeles silent as ever. AOC had gone quiet, too. Behind the scenes, her office was in motion. Meetings were rescheduled, staff were redirected. Interns were asked to pull every case file involving veterans from the last 2 years. The congresswoman was taking heat and she knew it, but she also knew something else. This wasn't just a PR firestorm, it was a reckoning. Because the truth was that Vietnam veteran she mentioned on air, his case had fallen through the cracks. Not intentionally, but that didn't make it better. Her office had meant to follow up. Then a backlog grew, staff turned over, a form was lost, a call wasn't returned. And then nothing. He was still waiting. Now the country knew. Inside her campaign headquarters, an aide cautiously brought it up. "We're getting hammered online, mostly from vets." AOC didn't flinch. "Are they wrong?" The aide said nothing. Another staffer, a former Army specialist, added, "Some of them are writing in. They want action, not an apology." She nodded. Good. Across the country, a different kind of mobilization had begun. Vets were organizing, not to protest, but to document. They started tagging their reps, posting screenshots of delayed claims, sharing stories of lost paperwork, long waits, broken promises. The hashtag #still waiting started to trend. And at the center of the storm were two people, one who had worn a uniform on screen and one who had promised to serve those who wore it for real. Neither of them planned for this, but now neither of them could ignore it. And when a surprising voice re-entered the conversation, quietly with no press release, everything shifted again, because Stallone wasn't finished. Sylvester Stallone hadn't said a word in public since the interview. No tweets, no interviews, no publicist statements, just silence. And yet late that Friday evening, a quiet post appeared on his personal Instagram. No fanfare, no caption, just a photo, grainy, unfiltered, almost accidental. It showed him sitting in a folding chair beside an elderly man in a camouflage jacket. The setting looked like the back lot of a VFW hall or maybe a community center. On the table, two paper cups, a stack of folders, and a worn-out VA claims booklet. The man was talking. Stallone was listening. That was it. But the post hit like a lightning bolt, because it wasn't just a photo. It was a reminder, a message. In the margins, this isn't about politics. It's about presence. The comments poured in. Thousands within the hour. Vets, families of vets, nurses, social workers, even a few politicians quietly acknowledging the power of the image. No speech, no press conference, just a folding chair in time. News outlets picked it up almost immediately. One journalist called it the most powerful political statement made this week, and it didn't come from a politician. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, the ripple effect was beginning to turn into a wave. AOC's office issued a statement the next morning. Not defensive, not polished, just real. "We hear the veterans who spoke out. We hear the ones who didn't. Our team is reviewing every unresolved claim that has come through our office since 2020. If we failed you, we're going to make it right." No spin, no excuses. The next day, she went one step further. She walked into a closed-door meeting with a Republican representative from Texas, one known for his fierce advocacy on veterans issues. Cameras weren't invited. Staff were told to keep it quiet. What emerged was a working draft of a new bipartisan bill, a streamlined system for congressional casework involving veterans, a 30-day response mandate, more oversight, a dedicated liaison at the VA to track delays, real timelines, real consequences for silence. No name for the bill yet. But staffers from both sides called it something unofficial, the Still Waiting Act. And it might have stayed quiet, too, if not for one unexpected leak. A staffer posted a blurry snapshot of a whiteboard from that meeting, scribbled across the top in the red marker. "Listen first, then fix it." The internet lit up. The story had shifted from confrontation to collaboration, from viral jabs to policy drafts, from posturing to presence. And at the heart of it still was that image, too. paper cups, a folding chair, a man who never served in the military showing up anyway. AOC hadn't said Stallone's name since the interview. He hadn't said hers either. But they didn't need to, because now it wasn't about them. It was about who was watching. And the veterans who had been waiting, some for years, were finally seeing movement. The next question wasn't who won the argument. It was who would finish the work. The phone rang twice before he picked up. Hello. His voice was raspy, slow, but clear. A man who'd lived long enough to measure words before using them. Mr. Reynolds, the voice on the other end said. This is Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. Silence. Then you mean your staff, right? No, sir. It's me personally. There was another pause, longer this time. She could hear a faint television in the background, then the soft click of it being turned off. I wasn't expecting a call, he said. I know. I should have called months ago. He didn't respond, not right away. Then came the weight of it all wrapped in one sentence. I've been waiting 12 years. She took a breath. I read your file. The paperwork went through 3 departments. It should have been resolved last year. My team let it slip. I let it slip. And I'm not calling to excuse that. I'm calling to ask what you need right now. The old veteran didn't get emotional. He didn't yell. He didn't cry, but his answer landed like a hammer. I need someone to act like I matter before I'm dead. That was it. No political framing, no crafted narrative, just a raw truth that cut deeper than any televised debate. AOC swallowed hard. You do matter, and I will follow this personally. You'll hear back within the week. You have my word. He didn't thank her. Not because he was ungrateful, but because gratitude wasn't the point. The call ended. AOC sat still. Her phone still pressed to her ear, even after the line went dead. Sometimes the most humbling moments come when no one's watching. Back at her office, she typed a simple directive and emailed it to every team member. No more silence. Every vet gets a human call. No emails, no form letters. We talk, we listen, we fix. Meanwhile, across the country, more veterans began receiving calls too. Not from politicians, but from staffers, from volunteers, from newly hired outreach coordinators. The change was quiet, but it was spreading. At a town hall in Pennsylvania, an Iraq war vet raised his hand and said, I didn't come here to fight with anybody. I came to see if something Stallone said was true, that sometimes people actually show up when it matters. The room went quiet. He added, I got a call yesterday. First time in 8 years, that moment wasn't recorded. It didn't go viral, but it mattered because real change isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a phone ringing in the dark and someone finally answering. And for Stallone, watching from afar, that was the moment he knew the interview had done something more than stir controversy. It had started a correction. A week after the phone call, a letter landed on AOC's desk. Not an email, not a press request, a physical letter. Handwritten, shaky cursive on yellow legal paper. No return address, just a postmark from upstate New York. It read, Congresswoman, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't write many letters anymore. Hands don't work like they used to. But I saw the interview, the one with you and that actor, and I want you to know. It made me angry at first. Angry because it felt like one more example of people in power talking about us like we're broken furniture. Then I saw what happened after the bills being drafted, the calls being made. Someone from your office called. My buddy who served with me in Desert Storm said they'd help him get his medication faster. They actually called, not emailed, not mailed a pamphlet. They talked. He cried after he hung up. He didn't say it, but I know it. I'm not writing to praise you. I still don't trust Washington, probably never will, but I wanted you to know we notice. We always notice, that's all. A vet who's still watching. AOC read it twice, then she slipped it into a folder labeled Constituent Notes Personal, a category her staff had created that week for messages that weren't asking for anything, just sending something out into the void, hoping someone listened. Later that evening, she walked into her staff meeting with the letter in hand. She read it aloud. No one spoke for a full minute afterward. Then one intern, barely out of college, said quietly, It's working. AOC nodded. It's starting. But there was more to be done. The bipartisan bill, unofficially known as the Still Waiting Act, was gaining traction. Co-sponsors were joining. Amendments were being added. Language was being tightened to ensure accountability didn't get buried in bureaucracy, and then something unexpected happened. Stallone released a short video, just 60 seconds, no music, no dramatic lighting, just him seated on a simple bench outside a community center. He looked into the camera and said, "I'm not a politician. I don't have a platform, just a voice. And I used it because I've seen the faces of men and women who feel forgotten. But now some of them are getting calls, getting help. That matters, so don't stop, keep going. No credit needed, just results, that was all." It went viral within hours. But the tone had changed. The world wasn't watching to see who would win. They were watching to see if anything real would come of it. And behind all the noise, that single letter scrawled in worn handwriting reminded everyone what this was about. Not signs, not headlines, but dignity. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet only found in government buildings before something real is said. It was a congressional subcommittee hearing on Veterans Affairs. Standard stuff, stacked paperwork, filtered coffee, bored reporters, but this one had a different energy. There was a man seated at the witness table, gray stubble, Navy windbreaker, hands trembling just slightly. His nameplate read Thomas J. Reynolds. Yes, that Reynolds, the Vietnam vet, the one AOC had called weeks earlier. He wasn't there for drama. He wasn't a political prop. He'd been invited by the committee chair after word of his case made its way up the chain. And now, after years of silence, he had the floor. He adjusted his mic, looked around the room, and said, "I didn't come here to shame anyone. That's not my style. I came here because I got a phone call." The room leaned in. "For 12 years, I waited, filed paperwork, followed up, called numbers that never answered. I watched friends die waiting. Thought maybe I would, too." He paused. Then a call came and things started to move. Not fast, not perfectly, but someone saw me, and that made the wait feel worth it. "No one interrupted," he continued. "I don't know what changed. Maybe that Stallone guy said something that stuck. Maybe some politician finally listened. Doesn't matter to me. What matters is I got my dignity back." One congressman asked what he'd recommend changing in the system. Reynolds looked him dead in the eye. "Before you ask for votes, ask a vet if they've been heard." That was the quote that made headlines. It was clipped, shared, turned into a graphic. But in the room, what people remembered most wasn't the words. It was the way he said them. No anger, no heat, just tired clarity. AOC sat in the second row, not as a speaker, but as a listener. She didn't speak once. She didn't need to because this wasn't her moment, it was his. Afterward, Reynolds passed her quietly in the hall. They nodded to each other. No words exchanged, but in that glance, something passed between them. Mutual recognition. A week later, Stallone sent a private message to Reynolds through a mutual contact. It read, "You did good, sir." Reynolds never responded. He didn't need to because that hearing wasn't about him getting attention. It was about using his story to push something bigger forward. And behind closed doors, staffers were already drafting language to accelerate VA claims for elderly veterans. A clause unofficially dubbed the Reynolds Rule. One hearing, one voice, one long overdue change. And all across the country, people started asking if one veteran could shake the system by simply speaking the truth. What happens if hundreds do? The frenzy had slowed, the headlines cooled. The trending hashtags faded, even the late-night hosts moved on. But in the quiet space that follows a media storm, the real work had begun. AOC's office now had a dedicated veterans liaison. Every Monday, the first hour of her schedule was blocked off for calls. Not speeches, not meetings, just calls one-on-one with veterans in her district. Some thanked her, some yelled, most just wanted to be heard. She didn't record the calls. She didn't advertise them, she just made them. The bipartisan bill, officially named the Veterans Timely Support Act, passed through committee with rare unanimity. What began as a public sparring match had birthed a piece of legislation both sides could stand behind. One clause in the bill required that congressional offices provide a point of contact within 48 hours of receiving a veteran case. Another required quarterly reporting so that claims no longer vanished into silence. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't fix everything, but it was movement. Meanwhile, Stallone stayed out of the spotlight. He quietly partnered with a national veterans nonprofit, donating funds for mobile care units. No press release, no ribbon cutting, just a few leaked photos of him unloading crates and shaking hands in Arizona. One vet posted, "He showed up again," and in a surprising twist, AOC sent him a handwritten note, just a few lines. "You didn't have to come on that show, but I'm glad you did. We don't always agree, but the veterans won't wait for us to. Thank you for showing up, Alexandria." Stallone never posted the note, never mentioned it in interviews, but a CNN producer later confirmed it now sat framed in his office, tucked between a photo of his daughters and an old First Blood poster. The final ripple of their confrontation came not in politics, but in culture. A new PSA campaign launched across the country: billboards, radio spots, short videos. The tagline was simple: "Don't let them wait." It didn't feature celebrities, just real vets, real families, real voices. One clip showed a young woman holding up her father's folded flag. He waited 3 years for help. He died on month 34. The silence that followed was louder than any slogan. By then, most people had forgotten the original CNN segment. They barely remembered what was said or who raised their voice. But something lingered, not the conflict, but the correction. Because once the cameras turned off, something rare happened. People actually followed through, not everyone, but enough to matter. And as both Stallone and AOC quietly returned to their corners of the world, they shared something few political opposites ever do: a lesson in what it means to act when the cameras are gone. The bill was signed, the hotline went live. Veterans began receiving callbacks in hours instead of months. The backlog shrank slowly, unevenly, but it shrank for most of the public. The moment had faded, but for those it touched, the change lingered, quiet, necessary, and long overdue. AOC didn't turn the story into a campaign ad. She didn't run a victory lap. Instead, she shifted her approach. Caseworkers were trained differently now. Walk-ins were prioritized, follow-ups were mandatory. Every veteran case required a second set of eyes before closure. And something else changed, too. Every month, her team printed out 5 handwritten veteran stories, good, bad, in progress, and put them on her desk. Not filtered, not rewritten, just real. She read every single one. Some made her angry, some made her cry. One, scribbled in broken English by a Korean War veteran's granddaughter, simply said, "He didn't need much, just a call." He got one, "Thank you." She kept that one tucked in her notebook. Stallone, meanwhile, returned to the screen. He signed on to direct a smaller film, his first in years, not centered on violence or revenge. It was about a Vietnam veteran trying to reconnect with his daughter after 30 years of silence. He said little about it publicly, just called it a story that finally felt like it had earned its time. Critics would later call it the most personal work of his career. He didn't attend the premiere. Instead, he spent the evening at a community center in Chicago, watching the film on a fold-out chair next to a group of veterans and their families. After the credits rolled, he shook their hands. One man hugged him. No cameras were there to catch it except one blurry phone photo posted by a teenage volunteer. The caption read, "He showed up again." But none of this, no bill, no PSA, no film, had been part of a grand plan. There was no strategy board, no media campaign. It had started with one confrontation, a congresswoman ready to challenge what she saw as hypocrisy, and an actor who refused to posture, who answered not with fury, but with memory. Two worlds collided on live TV, and somehow, instead of chaos, they sparked correction. At a small event hosted by the nonprofit Stallone had joined, a young veteran stood up and said, "I don't remember everything from that CNN interview, but I remember this." Someone said, "We need to show up," and I think about that every time I check on my guys now. The room applauded. Not loud, not forced, just right. That phrase, "we need to show up," would go on to be printed on brochures, stenciled on resource vans, and even carved into the wall of a new veteran center built in DC. Stallone never visited that wall. AOC did. She didn't take a selfie. She didn't make a speech. She just stood in front of the words, hands in her coat pockets, and nodded once. A reporter spotted her, asked if she had a comment. She said, "No, just needed to see it, because some moments don't need to be retold, they just need to be remembered. And sometimes the most powerful legacies are the ones that never ask for applause."